everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the latest episode of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. And this week we are featuring an artist where the phrase fits being at the right place at the wrong time. We are featuring Kim Tolliver. Why Kim is technically having 2 debut albums and no follow-up, and why Kim never had a hit single, well, we discuss this after the needle drops.
She don't know you like I do, and I know she never will. That I want a head for you, that I want a head for you.
Kim Tolliver had her roots in gospel music, but by the late 50s she took her first steps in blues and R&B, and soon became a sensation in Cleveland. From Cleveland she made it all over the world as a well-known club singer. She even was in Oakland and Australia. So it took some time before she made her first recordings, which took place in 1967 for the Sure Shot label. And the single was called In Return of Your Love. Shortly after it was released, it got dropped because of bad sales. Shortly after, she recorded for Jack Taylor's Rojac label for other singles, and these were I Tried to Do Better, Tuesday Child, Let Them Talk, and Driving Me into the Arms of a Stranger. All of these recordings are considered among her finest recordings. These recordings were supported, written, and produced by Fred Briggs. He soon became Kim's third husband, and these two together created some fantastic music. Fred Briggs was highly involved in the recordings from Marjorie Joseph. He has his fair share of songwriting on her first album, and on her second album, Phase 2 for Stax, Kimberly is also involved in songwriting. And the first two albums from Marjorie Joseph are considered her best. So you can expect some high qualities from these two. In 1971, around the same time of the release of Marjorie's debut album, Kim and Fred recorded Kim's debut album, which she released under the name of Kim Briggs. And this is a pre-sale version of the album, which was then called Passing Clouds. They wanted to sell the album to Stax because of good connections, but Stax refused to release the album. So it was released in 1971 on Fantasy. Honestly, I can understand why Stax made the decision not to release the album. It's a kind of tryout album with different sounds and different variations of vocals. So it's not my favorite one, but I think it's a very interesting insight into how Kim developed from this debut album to her next debut album, which was released in 1973 and was called Come and Get Me, I'm Ready, and she released it under the name Kim Tolliver. This album is considered as one of the greatest deep soul albums of all time, in the same league as Doris Duke's I'm a Loser. From this album, there was no single release. Keep that in mind for later. This album didn't do well as well, so it was pretty soon taken off the market. So if you find an album without a cutout, a drill hole, or any kind of discount mark, go and get it. Also, if you find that album with a cutout, a drill hole, or any kind of discount mark, go and get it. As you can see, this was an original price of $1.65. Nowadays you pay between $15 and 35 euros or dollar for an original pressing. And if you ask me what is an essential album to have in a soul collection, this is one of them. It's an absolutely outstanding album from the beginning to the end. Unfortunately, it didn't do much back in the day. Up to the mid-70s, Kim and Fred recorded a whole bunch of songs which would be included for a follow-up album that never saw the light of the day. Only Standing Room Only in 1975 on the Pathfinder label was released, and it's now considered as one of the greatest soul country songs you've ever heard. It's a cover version, but it's a fine recording. Also, a kind of up-tempo song from 1975 was also released by Kim, and it was called I Don't Know What Foot to Dance On. Also, these recordings didn't do much. Her final attempt to finally get a hit record out was in 1980, when she reunited with Jack Taylor to record 2 following singles, and these were Let Them Talk and Where Were You? You guessed right, these songs didn't do well either, and Kim decided to leave the music business behind her. And she became a very, very successful real estate agent. In the 90s, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer, and unfortunately, she passed away in 2007. Why was she not having a hit single? You remember when I told you that there were no compilations and no single releases from this album? We are talking about 1973. And this was still a time where radio stations were deciding if you are a hit or a miss. And without a single release, radio stations wouldn't pick you up. In 1974, late 1973, in the beginning of 1974, was actually the first time when a DJ decided what was a hit. And that was Soul Makusa, which was released in 1973, and of course, Love Theme by Barry White. It was played in the clubs up and down, and people bought it, without being ever played, at least in the beginning, on a radio station. So doing not a single release was kind of, from the beginning, it was clear it wouldn't be a hit. What else was an issue? Back in the days, we're talking like mid-70s, the disco roller coaster was in full swing. And Kim had the same talent to sing from sorrow, heartbreak and depression. You would believe every word of it. And I quote a record executive when asked why he didn't release the Doris Duke I'm a Loser album, which is considered as one of the greatest, also one of the greatest deep soul albums. I quote, "These albums were so depressing, we weren't sure the men and the women weren't buying it, so we didn't release it." And from the mid-90s up to now, people see 70s music in a different light. And they find out about these albums and think, wow, how good are these records? How I believe every word they sing. And it's now a different look on that period of time and a different look on these songs. And therefore, from our point of view today, it's sometimes very hard to believe why such records weren't big hits. But if you lived in back then, in that time, with these circumstances, it might be a little clearer. So these two factors were actually why Kim never had a real big hit single. But what is very, very happy is that people are trying to get her singles, people are trying to get her albums, and this is, you can easily find that on Discogs, on eBay. I've seen it numbers of times on record fairs. Even if it's not been sold so well back in the day, but they produced a certain amount which got in the discount bin, but is now available. You can hear this album on Spotify, you can hear it on YouTube, and I promise you, you won't be disappointed. So once again, a big thanks for watching. I hope you guys are doing great. I'll see you next time, and I hope you listen to some good music, maybe Kim Tolliver. Thanks. Goodbye.